The mid-17th century was an age of shifting empires and endless wars at sea. Spain had built its wealth on gold and silver from the New World, but England, France, and the Dutch Republic were eager to break that monopoly. Privateers, legalized pirates with government licenses, were unleashed to raid Spanish ships and settlements. But when wars ended, thousands of sailors suddenly found themselves unemployed, armed, and very skilled in naval combat. With no wages to rely on, many turned to piracy. What began as a side effect of imperial rivalries soon transformed into a global phenomenon, spreading from the Caribbean to the coast of Africa and even the Indian Ocean. The stage was set for what history now calls the Golden Age of Piracy. Contrary to Hollywood stereotypes, pirate ships were not simply ruled by fear. In fact, they were some of the most democratic institutions of their time. Captains were elected by the crew and could be replaced if they failed to deliver plunder or acted unjustly. Important decisions, such as whether to engage in battle or where to sail next, were made collectively. Loot was divided according to strict rules. The captain usually took 2 shares, officers 1.5, while ordinary sailors received 1 share each. Even injuries were compensated. Losing an arm might grant you extra gold. In a world where Navy and merchant sailors often lived under brutal discipline and starvation wages, pirate life, though dangerous, offered freedom, equality, and a sense of belonging that few could find on land. Every empire tried to hunt pirates, but in reality, many colonial governors quietly tolerated them, especially when local economies benefited from stolen Spanish treasure. Out of this uneasy coexistence grew pirate havens, safe harbors where ships could resupply, sell plunder, and recruit new men. The most famous was Nassau in the Bahamas, which became known as the Pirate Republic. For a brief moment in history, it was a thriving community of outlaws, where figures like Charles Vane, Benjamin Hornigold, and later Edward Teach, better known as Blackbeard, walked freely. Taverns overflowed with rum, deals were struck over stolen cargoes, and the Jolly Roger flag became a symbol of defiance against kings and empires. These havens weren't just hideouts, they were the beating heart of pirate culture. Among the many captains who ruled the seas, none became as feared or as famous as Edward Teach, better known as Blackbeard. Tall, broad-shouldered, and with a thick black beard, he mastered the art of psychological warfare. Before battle, he tied slow-burning fuses into his beard and hat, setting them alight so smoke and sparks poured around his face. To enemies, he looked like a demon rising from the sea. His flagship, Queen Anne's Revenge, terrorized the American coast and Caribbean waters in 1717 and 1718. But Blackbeard was more than a brute. He was a strategist who understood fear was often more powerful than cannon fire. Though his career was short, his legend cemented the image of the archetypal pirate in history and popular culture. Piracy was overwhelmingly a man's world, yet 2 women carved their names into legend: Bonny and Mary Read. Disguised as men, they joined pirate crews and quickly proved their courage in battle. Sailing alongside the notorious Calico Jack Rackham, they fought fiercely with pistols and cutlasses, earning respect from hardened sailors. When Rackham's ship was finally captured in 1720, many of his men hid below deck, but Bonny and Read were among the few who stood and fought to the very end. Their stories challenge gender norms of the era, and centuries later, they remain icons of defiance, courage, and freedom on the high seas. The very success of piracy eventually brought its downfall. By the early 18th century, pirate raids had disrupted trade to such an extent that empires could no longer ignore the threat. The British Crown in particular launched an aggressive crackdown, sending powerful naval squadrons to the Caribbean. Governors who once turned a blind eye now hanged pirates in public to send a message. The capture and execution of Blackbeard in 1718 symbolized the turning tide. Within a decade, most major pirate crews were destroyed, their havens dismantled, and the so-called Pirate Republic of Nassau crushed. By the 1730s, the Golden Age of Piracy had ended, leaving behind legends, myths, and a lasting fascination with men and women who dared to defy the world's greatest empires. Though the Golden Age of Piracy lasted barely 80 years, its cultural impact has endured for centuries. Pirates became symbols of rebellion against rigid hierarchies, inspiring songs, ballads, and later novels like Treasure Island. The Black Flag with skull and crossbones, the Jolly Roger, became one of the most recognizable icons in history. In reality, few pirates buried treasure, wore eye patches, or kept parrots, but those images live on thanks to sailors' tales and the imagination of storytellers. Beyond the myths, historians see pirates as early experimenters in equality and self-governance, men and women who carved out a brief but radical alternative to the empires that ruled their age. Their world was brutal and short-lived, yet the dream of freedom on the open sea still echoes whenever we think of the word pirate.